January 2026. Amazon's internal memo landed quietly. No press release, no earnings call footnote. It said plainly that AI agents were now performing the work of knowledge workers. 30,000 corporate jobs gone. Then, within days, a second story emerged for Wall Street. Efficiency, restructuring, optimization. Two completely different explanations. Same company, same cuts, same week. This is unpriced risk. Everything made sense, right up until it didn't. The gap between those two narratives is where the real story lives. More than 1 million people in a single country in 12 months. The official count of AI-attributed cuts across all of corporate America came to roughly 55,000. Independent modeling put the real number somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000. The distance between those figures doesn't come from bad data. It comes from deliberate choices about what to call things and when. Amazon would be a curiosity if it were one company doing this once. It isn't, and underneath all of it, something quieter is happening, something that doesn't show up in layoff announcements, because it was never announced. The real displacement isn't in the headlines. It's in the job postings that were never written. Positions that opened up, got absorbed by software, and stopped existing without anyone filing anything or saying a word. Amazon is the entry point. Every major US company is the story itself, and the mechanism that made all of it possible has been sitting in federal law since 1988, unnoticed, unamended, and perfectly designed for exactly this moment. The 55,000 figure isn't an undercount by accident. It was built to be small, deliberately, carefully small. In a 2025 survey of US hiring managers, 59% said AI framing was chosen as the least bad reason for cuts. Cleaner than admitting tariff exposure. Safer than saying demand had simply collapsed. Blame tariffs and the current administration comes after you. Blame weak demand and the stock drops. Blame AI and investors nod, analysts model efficiency gains, and the narrative positions the company as forward-looking rather than financially distressed. Oxford Economics ran the numbers on this. Their conclusion wasn't that the AI displacement story was wrong. It was that some companies were using it as a pretext, dressing up corrections to pandemic-era overhiring. The language of the future deployed to explain the failures of the past. Companies have always managed headcount through attrition, not hiring when someone leaves, letting the number quietly shrink. That's not new. What's new is this. For the first time, production is going up while headcount goes down. AI isn't just filling the vacancy, it's absorbing the function. The output doesn't drop. The role doesn't come back. That's not a hiring freeze. That's something that doesn't have a name in the official data yet. The job finding rate in AI-exposed occupations dropped 14% after ChatGPT's release, and that decline doesn't register as a layoff. It shows up as silence, a requisition that never gets opened, a role that stops being posted without anyone announcing why. So the crisis isn't being hidden by lying about the numbers. It's being hidden by choosing which numbers get to exist at all. That's a much harder thing to see and a much harder thing to fight. The people feeling this most directly aren't in the official count, because the official count was never designed to find them. It took one person on a Saturday morning to finally build something that could, and then that person took it down. On March 15th, a tool appeared online that mapped every job in America by AI exposure. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed by millions. Then parts of it came down. The person who built it was Karpathy, co-founder of OpenAI, former director of AI at Tesla, not an economist, not a labor researcher, someone who had actually constructed the systems now being deployed at scale. His tool mapped AI exposure across 342 Bureau of Labor Statistics occupations, not aggregate data, granular. Claims adjusters, paralegals, junior financial analysts, medical coders. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks employment across the entire U.S. economy, and this tool went through it occupation by occupation, assigning each one an exposure level and a substitutability window. It didn't say AI impacted roles, which is the phrase corporate America had been using to avoid saying anything specific. It said, this occupation, this level, this timeline. It went viral within days. When a company announces it's cutting AI impacted roles, No one outside the building knows which roles. That's deliberate. Karpathy's tool removed that cover, gave anyone with a browser a precise picture of which occupations were most exposed. And that picture lined up uncomfortably well with the occupations major employers had quietly stopped posting for. It wasn't pulled because the methodology was flawed. The partial removal came after the occupation mapping began to align too precisely with recent hiring freezes at companies that had said nothing publicly about those decisions. The accuracy was the problem, which is worth sitting with for a moment. The graduates already knew something was wrong, even without it. The 11-point drop in full-time placement rates between 2024 and 2025 hadn't come with an explanation. No press release, no memo, nothing at all. Karpathy's tool was the closest thing to an answer that those graduates were already living the question of. Then it disappeared before most of them found it. The company that benefited most from that silence had already told two completely different stories about the same 30,000 jobs, and made sure the two audiences would never compare notes. Amazon sent the same 30,000 job cuts to two different rooms with two different explanations. One room got the memo, the other got the earnings call. Neither room was ever supposed to hear what the other was told. In January 2026, an internal memo circulated inside the company attributing those cuts to AI agents. The framing was efficiency, progress, the kind of language that lands well in a board presentation. AI is working, the investment is producing results, the headcount reduction is the proof. That memo existed. It went to the right rooms. Then came the earnings call. Andy Jassy, Amazon's CEO, on the record, walked it back. Not AI-driven, he said. Not right now, at least. One company, one headcount reduction, two accounts that could not both be true, delivered to audiences that would never compare notes. Neither statement was a lie in the way that gets you sued. Both were strategically true for the room they were delivered in. The memo needed the AI framing to justify the investment thesis, to tell investors the spending on infrastructure was producing measurable returns. The earnings call needed the opposite, because publicly quantifying AI displacement creates liability that Amazon's legal team does not want triggered. It's like a thermostat set to different temperatures in the same house, each room comfortable as long as nobody opens the door between them. Federal disclosure requirements create real exposure the moment you start attaching specific causes to specific cuts. Union scrutiny follows, regulatory scrutiny follows. And then comes the question nobody wants asked out loud. If the AI is this efficient, why is AI spending still accelerating? Companies can't publicly quantify displacement without undermining one story or the other, so they quantify it for neither audience. 60% of hiring managers plan to cite AI in 2026 cuts. 9% say AI has fully replaced any role. 51 percentage points of distance between those two numbers, both narratives running simultaneously, by design, to audiences that will never compare them. Whether that gap reflects genuine uncertainty about what AI has actually replaced, or simply careful message discipline, is something the public record doesn't resolve. What the public record also doesn't resolve, why the federal law that governs mass layoffs has never once required employers to say whether automation was the reason. The gap between 55,000 and 300,000 looked like a data problem. Bad definitions, inconsistent reporting, the usual friction between government statistics and what's actually happening inside companies. It isn't that. Companies overstated AI displacement to investors. The memo version, the efficiency narrative, the proof that infrastructure spending was actually working. Then they understated it to regulators and journalists. The earnings call version, the walkback. Neither account is the real number. The real number lives in headcount that simply stopped existing without an announcement, a severance filing, or anything that would legally require one. The gap didn't close because both overcorrections were useful to the same people at the same time. An Anthropic study from March 2026 found that actual AI adoption in the US workforce remained a fraction of what AI could already feasibly perform. The displacement curve hadn't fully arrived yet. That finding is worth pausing on. The silence was already doing structural work before the real wave hit. The wage gap between AI-augmented workers and middle-skill workers in disrupted roles was already projected at 71 percentage points by end of 2026, up from 42 points in 2022. That's not a future problem. That's a present one that hadn't been named yet, and by then, there was nothing left trying to measure the distance between the two accounts. Except one federal law, still on the books, designed to count events, not processes. It was never built for this. The data still hasn't caught up, and not because the tools were slow, because nobody was required to build them. The WARN Act, the federal law mandating 60 days notice before a mass layoff, has been on the books since 1988. It was designed for a world of factories and plant closings, events with a date, a location, a head count. It measures moments. It was never built to measure processes, the slow, function-by-function erosion of a department that produces more output with fewer people every quarter. Which means every company that stopped backfilling roles, froze job requisitions, or quietly let attrition do the work of a layoff has operated in a space the law simply doesn't touch. The silence isn't a workaround, it's the default. The Bureau of Labor Statistics monitors job finding rates, posting volumes, separation types across the entire U.S. economy, but it doesn't ask employers why a role wasn't refilled. There's no form for that, no requirement to explain the absence. The problem isn't that the WARN Act failed to catch AI displacement. The problem is that it was never designed to see it. Every major push to update it, offshoring in the 2000s, the financial crisis in 2008, stalled in Congress. It has not been substantively amended since the year it was signed. Automation was never even proposed as an addition. Amazon told two stories to two separate audiences and trusted the press would only count the layoffs someone announced. They were right. The most important labor statistic of the AI era is the one nobody is required to produce. Thanks for watching Unpriced Risk. Hit subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.